And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Russia-Ukraine war has created the biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War. You've recently returned from the region. Tell me about the biggest humanitarian challenges that you've witnessed and what's caused response.
I think the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is that it's just such a constantly moving situation. It's evolving very quickly. For example, we had a huge movement of displacement in March. And now, though things have stabilized, we are seeing a lot of movement again, and we expect more so because of the onset of winter. In a lot of places, heat and the cold are going to be a huge issue. And so we do expect another wave of displacement.
Millions of people's lives have been disrupted and, as you say, have been displaced. What more support do you think is needed to help them?
Right now, we're working very hard on winterization and getting people safely into places that will keep them warm during the winter. You still have thousands of people right now sleeping in gyms, sort of all in congregate settings, in schools. And at the same time, there is somewhat of a normalcy kind of creeping back in so that people want to send their kids back to school. People want to go back to university. So it's struggling between keeping people safe during the winter, but also being able to open schools back up again. So it's this constant mix of sort of these shifting changes that are happening. And I think the most important thing right now is let's get people safely into places that can keep them warm over the winter.
And you've witnessed humanitarian crises around the world. How did it make you feel when you've visited the Ukraine and actually seen what's going on there?
I mean, it was such a mixture of intense, just inspiration and, just being in awe of the amount of support that people are getting from their friends, from their neighbors, from the private businesses. I mean, really, there's so much support coming in from everywhere. We know somebody who basically has mortgaged their business and their house to be able to support 20 families in a space that they're renting. It's this type of incredible acts of heroism that's so inspirational. But at the same time, knowing that in the East, hundreds of people are dying still every single day, that children's lives are being impacted for generations to come. I mean, those things kind of really sort of tear you apart in both directions.
What more would you like to see governments, leaders, the private sector to do to support them?
I think the intense pressure, the sanctions, the support to the Ukrainian government, as well as the humanitarian assistance, like we cannot let up on that. It's been such an incredible experience to be able to talk to local authorities and at the national level and understanding how much international support is so important for them to continue to fight. It's a psychological thing as well as a financial and, even with military support, it's all those things that we cannot let up on. Any minute that we let that go, I think there is a huge fear that they will be sort of, on their own trying to fight this battle that's so important to us all.
Do you think they feel abandoned by the rest of the world?
I don't think they feel abandoned, but I know it was interesting in a conversation that somebody mentioned that, Ukraine is no longer a trending emergency. And that kind of, hit me in the gut in that so much of public opinion and so much of the support isn't as focused right now. There's so many things happening. And I do think that they're very sensitive to needing that constant support.
Do you think there's a danger that the public have become desensitized to the war there?
I think it's inevitable. As humans, we see this often in disasters and crises. The first, 3 months or even 3 weeks are so intense. There's so much outpouring of support, of attention that really goes a long way. That equates to dollars and support on the ground. Usually, sort of after the 3 month mark, it disappears. And it's very difficult to get that sustained level of support that's needed. We are seeing that on the ground right now. I think the US government has been good to continue on with the humanitarian assistance, but it's also public opinion that's needed. We need to constantly keep pushing our Congress people and provide that political support, attention, and pressure to keep that going.
Well, the Biden administration has just pledged another $1 billion for security assistance. Do you feel they're taking the right action?
I do. I think it's so needed. Again, just constant attention and support is needed, and we need to make that commitment with dollars on the ground. I think the humanitarian space also needs to dig in deep, because right now we're going to see a huge need in basic materials like food, blankets, wood chips for heating, gas and water. Those are the things that are in huge need right now in the East.
What concerns you the most from what you've seen? And do you ever fear for your own personal safety there?
I think what I fear most right now is sort of the unknown. You know, we see sort of this level of normalcy that's happening in the West, but at the same time, just never knowing if, you know, a shelling or a bombing can come. So it's this like constant, it's terror, right? It's terror. It's just constant terror that you get used to. And you see the psychological effects on children, on mothers, on these families on a day-to-day basis, trying to go on and trying to go back to normal, which, you know, highlights just the resilience of people. But at the same time, you see it and it's constantly in the back of their mind. That's going to have major impacts on the economy as well as psychologically.
And do you fear for your own personal safety when you're there? And of course, the teams that CORE partners with locally on the ground?
I think that what has helped me with this work is kind of having, I guess, a impossible sense of everything will be okay. Otherwise, it would be difficult to do this job. So for myself, I don't feel unsafe. You know, I think we're very careful and we have good contacts to kind of give us good intelligence on where to go, where not to go. For our partners, though, that's a different story. So many people are making such incredible risks on a daily basis to help others, and it's them that are really suffering the cost of this war. We worry for them every single day, and yet, you know, their work is so needed.
What has shocked you the most that you've seen so far?
I think the most shocking thing right now, and just being on the ground, is just this incredible sense of determination to keep at this no matter what. We met this young woman who is a medical student, supporting the train stations when people come through. And I asked her, how long can you do this for? You must be exhausted. And she said completely, without missing a beat, I'll do this until I can walk on the beaches of the Ukrainian Crimea. And that just gives you an idea of how determined they are to see this through. I think that's shocking, because at that age and wanting a normal life, it's really, really impactful to see that nobody's wavering.
We're 6 months into the conflict now. From what you've seen, do you feel that there's any end in sight?
To be honest, seeing it from the outside, it does look like it's going to be a very long conflict. We are planning on, you know, deployments of a year at the very least, if not longer. I think it's difficult for people on the ground to absorb this. A lot of the folks that we've been speaking to, you know, the mothers that have left their husbands on the front lines with their children, are saying, you know, we don't want to get too settled here because maybe we'll be able to go back home in 2 months or a month or so. And so it's very difficult to kind of, you know, absorb that when we're looking at it from the outside, expecting for a much longer haul.
And you co-founded CORE with the Oscar-winning actor Sean Penn back in 2010 during the devastating earthquake in Haiti. What sets you apart from other organizations in your space, and what's your mission going forward?
Well, I think that we have a very, very good sense of sort of understanding that a lot of the lives that are being saved happen through friends, family, and neighbors. And we want to leverage that. We want to support the local groups to be able to do that. It's faster, it's more efficient, and we work very quickly on the ground because of that. I think we've been able to also kind of work outside of the traditional systems of humanitarian aid, just because, Sean has been an outsider for so long. So that really helps our perspective to kind of look at things at a different angle. We're big risk takers. And I think that that allows us to kind of do things that other people don't. And what's great is that we have amazing partners in the US government and other international agencies that then can take that to scale. For us moving forward, we really are digging into sort of the longer term housing situation for the displaced beyond the winter, and also looking at how do we create sort of, integration into the communities where people have moved into. That's our big focus in the next year.
How does the global platform that Sean has help the work that you do?
I mean, it's just been incredible. I think his biggest strength has been really bringing together both sides of the aisle in the United States around support to support Ukraine. We had an event in Washington, D.C., bringing together Republicans and Democrats. They were co-hosted by a Republican and a Democrat. And so for us, that's just a huge opportunity and gives us a lot of ability to kind of bring back the focus on, we're doing this for the humanitarian piece, and let's put the politics aside.
How worried are you about the impact of the Russian-Ukraine war on food insecurity, the rise in energy prices, and the cost of living crisis?
I mean, we're seeing it immediately in the places that we're working. In Haiti, we have some programs with the US government to deal with the food insecurity that's happening there. And we're seeing such a huge spike in malnutrition and starvation there because of directly this war. The prices have gone up. People were already struggling to just make a meal for their families on a daily basis. And now it's become, completely out of reach. So for us, we see that in the direct work that we're doing in Haiti. In Somalia and other places, it's just 1,000 times worse. So for us, again, the war in Ukraine has such larger impacts than just what's happening there. It has impacts everywhere, even in the United States. So that's why it's so important for us to continue bringing the attention and bringing the focus on supporting the Ukrainians and really getting past this war.
And just finally, Anne, on World Humanitarian Day, what is your message to the world?
I think the message that I can share is that anyone can be a humanitarian. It isn't this, incredibly heroic thing that needs to be done to be a humanitarian. Everyone can do a small piece to help somebody else. And I think we need to go back to that ethos. I think we've lost it someplace right now. And I think it's so reachable. Every single person has a responsibility to help somebody with what they can, no matter how small or no matter what it is.
Anne Lee, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.